the crash happened in a heartbeat. One moment, the black sedan carrying CEO Clara Whitmore was gliding through the busy downtown street. The next moment, screeching tires, shattered glass, and silence. When the car finally stopped spinning, Clara kept her eyes closed. Not because she was unconscious, but because she didn't want to face the chaos outside. The pressure, the reporters, the board members who already doubted her leadership. For a moment, pretending felt easier. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard the passenger door creak open. "Ma'am? Ms. Whitmore?" a familiar voice said softly. It was Daniel, her quiet executive assistant, the single dad who always arrived early, left late, and rarely spoke about his own life. Clara stayed still, breathing slowly, hoping he would think she had fainted. Then she heard him whisper something that made her chest tighten. "Please be okay," Daniel said, his voice trembling. "My daughter says you're the reason I still believe good people can succeed." Clara's heart skipped. Daniel continued, almost talking to himself. "You probably don't even remember, but last year when I had to miss work because Lily was in the hospital, you told HR not to cut my pay." A pause. "That kindness paid for her medicine." Clara's eyes suddenly burned. She had forgotten that moment completely. But to Daniel, it meant everything. As sirens grew louder in the distance, Clara realized something that hit harder than the crash itself. The smallest choices she barely remembered were shaping someone else's entire world. And for the first time since the accident, Clara slowly opened her eyes. The world was tilted. Smoke curled from the front of the car, and shards of glass glittered across the pavement like ice. Daniel was standing outside the passenger door, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, there's been an accident," he told the emergency operator, trying to stay calm. "2 passengers. The driver is conscious but shaken. The CEO, she might be unconscious." Clara almost smiled at that. Unconscious. For a second, she considered closing her eyes again. Pretending was easier than explaining why she had stayed silent. But then Daniel turned back toward the car, worry written across his face. "Ms. Whitmore?" he said again, softer this time. Clara pushed the door open. "I'm awake." Daniel jumped in surprise. "Oh, thank goodness." Relief washed over his face so honestly that Clara felt something twist in her chest. "You had me worried," he said, letting out a breath. "I thought the impact knocked you out." Clara stepped carefully onto the street. People were gathering nearby, phones raised, whispering. She hated crowds like this. But what she hated more was the memory of Daniel's words just moments earlier. "My daughter says you're the reason I still believe good people can succeed." Clara looked at him. Daniel's suit sleeve was torn, and a thin line of blood ran down his hand, yet he didn't seem to notice. "You're hurt," Clara said. He glanced down, almost embarrassed. "Oh, it's nothing." Nothing. Clara realized something uncomfortable. The man who had just protected her, worried about her, and praised her kindness, expected nothing in return. At that moment, the ambulance sirens grew louder. And Clara suddenly wondered, how many other quiet sacrifices from Daniel had she never noticed at all? The ambulance lights painted the street red and blue as paramedics rushed toward them. "Are either of you seriously injured?" one of them asked. "I'm fine," Clara replied automatically. Daniel lifted his hand slightly. "Just a small cut." The paramedic gently took his arm. "That small cut needs stitches." Daniel looked uncomfortable with the attention, but he allowed them to guide him toward the ambulance. Clara followed silently. For years she had run one of the most powerful companies in the city. Thousands of employees. Endless meetings. Decisions worth millions. Yet standing there now, she realized something unsettling. She barely knew the man who had worked beside her every single day. Daniel sat on the edge of the ambulance while a medic cleaned the wound. He winced slightly but stayed quiet. Clara finally spoke. "You never told me your daughter was sick." Daniel looked up, surprised. "Oh, that was a long time ago," he said gently. "She's doing much better now. But the hospital bills, Clara pressed. Daniel gave a small shrug. They were tough. But we managed. His words were calm, but Clara remembered what he had said earlier. That kindness paid for her medicine. Something about that sentence kept echoing in her mind. I barely remember approving that request, Clara admitted honestly. Daniel smiled. That's the thing about kindness, Ms. Whitmore, he said. The person giving it might forget, but the person receiving it never does. The words landed heavily. At that moment, Clara felt a quiet wave of realization. All the awards in her office. All the headlines about profits and expansion. None of them meant as much as one small decision she barely remembered making. And suddenly, she wanted to know Daniel's story. Not as a CEO, but as a human being. The paramedics finished bandaging Daniel's hand, but Clara's mind was still stuck on his words. The person giving kindness might forget, but the person receiving it never does. For years, Clara had believed leadership meant being strong, decisive, and always moving forward. There was never time to slow down and notice the small things. But Daniel had noticed. He stood up from the ambulance, flexing his bandaged fingers. I'll be fine, he said reassuringly. You should probably head home and rest. Today has been a lot. Clara studied him carefully. Daniel, she said quietly, how long have you worked for me? 4 years. 4 years. 4 years of early mornings, late nights, and quiet loyalty. And Clara barely knew anything about his life. Why didn't you ever ask for help again? She asked. Daniel looked confused. Help? With Lily? With the hospital bills? With anything? Daniel smiled gently, the kind of smile that carried both pride and exhaustion. Because you already helped once, he said. And that gave me the chance to stand on my own again. Clara felt a lump rise in her throat. At that moment, a police officer approached to take statements from witnesses. Reporters had started gathering nearby, cameras flashing. Normally, Clara would already be preparing a carefully worded public statement. But tonight felt different. She turned back to Daniel. What's your daughter like? She asked suddenly. Daniel's tired face brightened instantly. Oh, Lily? She's incredible, he said. She's 9 now. Loves science. She wants to be a doctor someday. Clara felt something shift inside her. For the first time in years, a business decision didn't feel like the most important thing in her world. Because somewhere out there, a little girl was dreaming about the future. And Clara suddenly realized she had the power to help that future grow. The flashing lights slowly faded as the street began returning to normal. But Clara Whitmore knew something inside her had changed. She looked at Daniel, who was preparing to leave with one of the officers to finish paperwork. Daniel, she called. He turned. Yes, Ms. Whitmore? For a moment, Clara hesitated. The words she wanted to say felt unfamiliar, less like a CEO giving instructions and more like a person finally speaking from the heart. Tomorrow, she said. Don't come to the office. Daniel looked worried. Did I do something wrong? Clara shook her head and smiled softly. No. Tomorrow you're taking a day off, and you're bringing Lily to meet me. Daniel blinked in surprise. Meet you? Yes, Clara said. Because if she wants to be a doctor, I know a few people who can show her what that path looks like. Daniel's eyes widened. And, Clara continued, starting next month, our company is launching a new employee support program. Medical assistance, family care, education support. Daniel stared at her. That's huge. Clara nodded thoughtfully. You reminded me today that a company isn't just numbers and profits. It's people. Daniel looked overwhelmed, emotion filling his eyes. You already helped my family once, he said quietly. Clara smiled. Then let's make sure no one else has to struggle alone. For the first time that day, Daniel laughed, a genuine, relieved laugh. As they walked away from the accident scene, Clara realized something powerful. The crash had lasted only seconds. But the reminder it gave her about kindness, humanity, and the quiet strength of ordinary people would change the way she led forever. And somewhere at home, a little girl named Lily was about to discover that sometimes